A simple change is all you need to avoid lifeless, turn, and boring watercolors. And this video is going to be your action plan for fresh and beautiful paintings. Take it with you before you start painting, and I know you'll see results. I'll go through each point I want to make while interpreting my version of this very plain photo, so you see exactly how I turn it into a gorgeous watercolor painting. And it starts with color because sometimes we're lucky to have a gorgeous reference photo to help us make wise color choices, but that's not always the case. And sometimes it's very hard. Take this turn photo I'm going to paint next. So today I'm focusing on color because anyone can benefit from it, whether they're painting outdoors, from reference, from imagination, and no matter what subject that they pick. First, quickly scan your photo and pick the main obvious colors without overthinking it. Just a few, as little as 3 or 4 to begin with, and later we can still add dark and bright options. So for example here, roughly I see green, brown, and gray. And this is where a lot of beginners will get trapped. Because with this much gray sky and water, this is going to be very dark and boring. That's why I know to add blue, because that would be an obvious choice for these elements and it's not as boring, even if I pick a muted blue like this Daniel Smith Mayan Blue Genuine. Gray is going to be my shadow color and it will also help to recreate the moody atmosphere of the painting, so this is it: green, brown, blue, and gray. Make sure there is at least one bright color in the bunch. Remember that in my case, even my blue is muted to match these ominous sky and water, so I better balance the muted blue and gray with bright colors. And don't get stuck on the shade your colors should be, especially since you'll be using just a few, and you'll see why later. I'm going to pick this Daniel Smith Green Gold and this vibrant Daniel Smith Quinidrinum Deep Gold because it's like a yellowish brown, so brighter than just brown. And there's no right answer for picking colors. Remember, it might vary with each person and the art can still look fresh and beautiful. So for instance, you might go for purple instead of blue, indigo or black instead of gray, and that is just fine as long as you have these bright colors and some dark colors in the bunch. Now, how can we balance these very turn and muted colors with very bright ones in a painting that is supposed to look moody and not boring? What works wonders is to overlap colors because we can benefit at the same time from colors mixing right on paper and creating new shades. Look at what happens here. We have a lot of the turn colors on paper and I'm starting to block in my bright green and brown shades quickly still. But if we keep it like that, which is what a lot of beginners do, it's just one block of blue color followed by one block of bright green and brown colors followed by more blue. And one of the secrets for gorgeous watercolor paintings is to reuse these colors elsewhere, and it's exactly why you wouldn't want to overwhelm yourself with 7, 8 or more colors. Here in the photo, we even have a reflection of the mountains in the water, which is great to have these colors appear there too. And if we didn't have this reflection, I'd probably add a little bit of my bright brown shade in the sky and water just to spice things up a little, because you can see that both colors mixed together do create a grayish color anyway, so there's no harm. But you can also act on how much pigment you add and keep some vibrancy there if you want, when there's more green or more brown added over blue, for example. And for painting the mountain reflections, that's a perfect technique to use. Just more green and brown added so they clearly show in the water, and now we have more balance, better color harmony in other words. So that's great, but with a particularly boring and turn reference photo like the one I'm using now, I could leave it at that and turn it into a more cheerful version. But since I picked it because I love the atmosphere, I want to add shadows. And the trap, as you know, is to add too much. Instead, you need to keep balancing colors. Add just the right amount of shadows and keep enough vibrancy of colors so it's a moody yet gorgeous watercolor in the end. And it's not going to be a problem because I'll use paint spray to get some of the areas a bit darker, but I'll interpret the reference photo in a way that benefits watercolor painting. For example, take this mountain in the middle. It's very visible because it's so tall and it's really dark. In this case, you need to plan for not making it that dark all over. Otherwise, let's say we use gray and paint all of it. it will look like a wall and it will make your painting heavy and spoil the beautiful greens and browns above and below. So what I do is leverage color mixing for color harmony once more. You can do that right on paper or in your palette, and it works the best when you work on the whole painting at the same time and not just one section and then another section, because it's easier to go correct the colors in every area when you work on the whole painting. I apply a mixture of gray and green, or gray and brown, depending on what mountain I paint, to block these strong shadows in. But I still keep the harmony and a gentle gradient between gray and green or gray and brown. It's the color mixing that helps dark colors blend into the bright ones without it looking odd, and vice versa. We don't even realize it's been done by just looking at a final painting, and you can achieve this through layering in watercolor, and most importantly, adjusting the colors little by little. Take your time, and I'm going to explain you how. And you can also learn this in depth, this particular painting, since it's available on my Patreon in real time with my instructions in real time. So I'll add the link to my Patreon in the description if you feel like joining. So one of the most important lessons in watercolors that I'm sure that I've heard many times is to start with light colors and go darker gradually. And that's because it becomes easier afterwards to build the contrast and adjust shadows, but also vibrant colors. And I see it all the time with my students locally. Some of them just load the colors with pigment too early, and then they can't add those touches because it's too dark already and the paintings look heavy. So here, what I like to do with my realistic painting style is to paint in layers and make those adjustments by adding more and more pigment in the paints, and by using darker colors like gray, I can create more shadows, define better clouds with this technique. I can also help shape the mountains even better without it looking like it's too much because of the previous and lighter layers. I can even increase vibrancy where I want more of it. And the great thing about watercolors is that they're transparent. So if the previous layer is completely dry, which should be the case when you want to layer, then the bright colors won't get muted by the dark ones. They might not be as bright as if they were layered on white paper for sure, but still you can improve vibrancy, as you can see in the mountains and also in the dark waters. Another powerful way to brighten up a dark painting is to add some highlights, but you have to be careful not to overdo that. I'll usually add some with white gouache, but here, since I had a lot of light in the sky and the water, it felt completely unnecessary. I have this action plan laid out on paper for you in more detail, so you can download that for free from the video description. Remember, you can also find me on Patreon to paint along, and for more of my tips and learn to loosen up realistic watercolors, you can watch this video next. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.